Art Carney got 6 Emmys for his role as Ed Norton. He won the Oscar instead of Al Pacino. But when his well-known Honeymooners co-star died in 1996, he didn't say a word. In Hollywood, everyone paid their respects. The family of Jackie Gleason sent flowers. Cast members who used to be on TV cried. It was quiet from Art Carney. In her autobiography, she wrote that he was smart and kind. She hoped they would talk again one day. They didn't. No one knew how bad what they did to each other was. He was born in Mount Vernon, New York, on November 4, 1918. In a very Irish Catholic family with 6 boys, he was the youngest. His father was a newspaperman, but Art was more shaped by the alcohol that flooded their home like water. 3 of his older brothers drank too much. His dad also drank. Art once said that most of us boys didn't smoke, but did drink. I didn't just say something. I meant to warn you. As a teenager, he started drinking daily. Not just sometimes or with friends. He thought drinking was normal as a child. He was going to fall into it, not if, but when. He was good early on. Being Franklin D. Roosevelt was one of his best tricks. He was the same as them, not just sounded like them. The tone, the voice, and the stop. People who were listening to the radio thought the president was talking. It became so strong that federal agents got involved. They were afraid it would make things harder during the war. Some foreign officials even thought that the speeches he was giving were real. It was risky, but it made him famous. After that, he used that voice on radio shows to sound like Roosevelt, Churchill, and Eisenhower, among others. Because of his bigger brother, Carney was already playing with the Horace Heights Orchestra by the time he was 18. It sounded very fancy. It wasn't. Fred Lowry, a blind whistler, lived with him. He also brought Art to drinking in the morning, but not coffee. Every day I drink gin and grapefruit juice. It felt like freedom at first. There were no rules and no guilt, but that freedom turned into a cage very quickly. He had no idea that he was hooked. He had a clear memory of one event. During a live show, he was so drunk that he couldn't even spell the sponsor's name, Tums. He spoke slowly and slurred his words. Sponsors were very angry. At age 23, he quit the band before they could fire him. The war then happened. August 15, 1944, was the 4th anniversary of his wedding. Being a machine gunner in the 28th Infantry Division in France was his job. A German mortar went off close. The bullet went through his right leg. He hadn't even shot his gun yet. Thought it was funny that he had never fired a gun and might not have wanted to, but the hurt person wasn't joking. His left leg was 3/4 of an inch longer than his right. He always walked with a limp. He was hurt badly and had to spend 9 months getting better. When he got home, he had a badge and scars that no one could see. His limp was clear. It wasn't the pain. He drank more. He used drugs to sleep. He began taking amphetamines. For him, the war had only been over for 2 months, but the impacts would last forever. Occasionally, he lost it. He couldn't handle the stress. Back then, no one called it PTSD, but that's what it was. In 1965, he had a breakdown that made him quit the odd pair. He wouldn't get sober until almost 30 years after the war. Carney was on the radio all the time in the late 1940s. It was with Milton Berle, Fred Allen, and Maury Amsterdam that he worked. He always came through for the team, like the second banana. No matter what voice or joke he did, he was always drunk behind the mic. They kept hiring him even though he slurred his words and blacked out sometimes. Too few people had his skill. The producers didn't deal with his drinking. Instead, they worked around it. It was hard for him after the war. Could a man who limps do well on TV? He got it done. To make his legs more balanced, he had shoes made just for him. But he didn't hide his limp. He used it. It was a part of his joke. His strange walks and dance moves weren't just for fun. They were ways for him to stay alive. He used pain to make a show. His friends laughed and didn't know, but the truth never left him. It got worse to drink. He was already on the edge with Horace Height's band. And he was drinking again, but this time it was worse. He had to leave the band when he was 23 years old, not because he wanted to. He was bad for business. It was already too late for him to fix his problem. There would be many more. He tried being funny on stage. That's not because he wasn't funny. It was because the stage scared him. The looks of the people in the crowd, the silence, and the stress made him anxious. He drank to calm down. Then he took some pills to get smarter. He had to take more pills just to sleep after that. He set up a bad situation. Repeat. Fear. Drugs. Shame. The person who made radio stars shine couldn't handle being the center of attention himself. He was even haunted in his personal life. The two met in high school and fell in love. In 1940, they got married. They had 3 kids named Paul, Brian, and Eileen. But drug abuse caused the marriage to fall apart. Art Carney almost didn't make history on TV because he didn't think he belonged there. When writers for the radio show Cavalcade of Stars asked him to be in a sketch with Jackie Gleason in 1951, Carney thought it was a mistake. He was already becoming a big star. Carney didn't think that well-known person knew who he was. There was no fake humility. He had been sneaking into the show as Newton the waiter on the Maury Amsterdam show and getting all the attention. But he still thought of himself as a small person. Everything that came after would be shaped by that way of thinking. There was a man whose skills could make a room full. Still, he had doubts about himself the whole time. The Honeymooners was made from that picture, and everyone met Ed Norton. People knew him by his white t-shirt, open vest, and pork pie hat. Something wasn't quite right behind the scenes, though. Carney strived for excellence. He thought it was important to practice every word, move, and beat. Gleason, he wanted anything to happen. Too much practice, he thought, would make the magic less powerful. Carney would show up, ready to work out. Gleason said no. That's why Carney built Norton's character by himself. He even wore special shoes to hide the fact that he walked with a limp because of an injury he got in battle. Carney was in charge of the silly moves and the timing, practicing by themselves, pushed by stress, pain, and finally, pills. Art Carney's life wasn't funny while he was making The Honeymooners. All 39 shows were filmed in real time in front of 1,000 people at the Adelphi Theater in Manhattan. That was enough to put pressure on them. But Jackie Gleason made things more difficult. He was known for changing lines right before the show started. He thought that practicing too much would take away from the joy. This meant that the actors often didn't know their lines when they first got on stage. For Carney, it was he couldn't do anything wrong, needed to get ready. Instead, he would get fresh lines and stage directions right before going on stage in front of a real crowd. The stress was too much to handle. The actors came up with secret visual cues to stay alive. When Gleason forgot a line, he would pat his gut. When someone had to go to the fridge, Audrey Meadows would look at it. On the screen, it looked good. Carney, on the other hand, was barely keeping it together backstage. He used drugs and booze to deal with the stress in his life. Anything to calm the storm in his head. It was a big deal when the show ended in 1956. In the United States, the show went from being ranked number 2 to number 19. For Carney, though, it was a release. No more editing at the last minute and panicking before live shows. His boss even said that Gleason has other plans, and Carney isn't one of them. That also makes Carney happy. He was free at last, and he made the most of it. His first show on Broadway was The Rope Dancers in 1957. He was James Hyland, a broken drunk father. It was put on 189 times and was nominated for 6 Tony Awards. He was praised by many. People said he was a master at mixing weakness, charm, and sadness. Not many people knew, though, that the part wasn't that hard. Carney was drinking a lot already. He had been for many years. Then came his most famous stage part. He played Felix Unger for the first time in Neil Simon's The Odd Couple in 1965. Next to Walter Matthau, it worked out great. Matthau was a mess. Carney was right on. The show became a huge hit. The critics went crazy. In later years, Tony Randall played Felix on TV. He said that Carney's version was the first and best. Fitz was more than just a clean freak thanks to Carney. He made him real, complicated, funny, and weak. Even Jack Lemmon, who played Felix in the movie, had a hard time getting away from Carney's shadow. His stage work was great, but his home life was falling apart. In 1965, his 25-year marriage was getting worse. They had been together for a long time and had 3 children together, but it couldn't last because of his habits. In his teens, Carney began drinking. By the 1960s, he was also hooked on cannabis and drugs like amphetamines. He said that his old comic partner would have gin and grapefruit juice for breakfast one time. Over time, it got worse. For years, Jan had been there for him, but his behavior got crazy and dangerous. She was fed up with it all. In the same year, the marriage ended, and then something even stranger took place. It was like Carney started to change into Felix Unger. He developed obsessive habits away from the stage. The most unsettling thing was how he stacked coins. In his dressing room, he would arrange coins in wonderful patterns based on their size, color, and value. He couldn't go on stage if even one was wrong. Co-workers began to notice. They said he missed signs and pushed back scenes because he couldn't stop setting things up. The person and the man became less clear-cut. Felix was no longer just a piece of paper. It looked like a cage. As of October 1965, only 7 months into their run, hit rock bottom. He had both an emotional and physical breakdown and went to a psychiatric hospital in Hartford to get help. He stayed there for almost 6 months. He told the truth about everything: the drinking, the drugs, and the breakdown. He told her that my first marriage was ending and that I was in bad shape. Broadway had already shown that Art Carney was good at what he did. In The Odd Couple, he played Felix Unger so well. Although some people didn't like it, Tony Randall later said that Carney was the first and best Felix. But something terrible happened when it was time to make the 1968 movie version. Jack Lemmon was picked instead by Paramount. They said it was about making money at the box office. But Carney thought something different. He thought that his recent breakdown and the fact that he had admitted to being addicted to drugs made him too risky or even uninsurable for a big-budget movie. He never got rid of that thought. The movie made more than $44.5 million, making it the 3rd most successful movie of that year. Seeing it succeed without him, there was not only upsetting, it scared him. But there were signs that things were getting worse before Hollywood turned its back on him. Strange things began to be seen by friends and co-workers. When Carney was stressed, he behaved like Felix Unger when he wasn't on stage. He would arrange his loose change in neat little towers on the vanity table, put the biggest coins at the bottom and the tiny ones at the top. It wasn't just strange, it was crazy. The folks around him knew what it meant. He was going down again. They could see what was going on. He was getting more and more close to another breakdown the more he behaved like Felix. It became impossible to tell the difference between Carney and Felix over time. In 1966, Jackie Gleason called Art Carney on the phone. There was no sign of Carney in public because he was depressed and abusing drugs. However, Gleason wanted Ed Norton to come back, and Carney had always been that person. Carney came back against all odds. There was something wonderful that happened when the Honeymooners came back on the Jackie Gleason show. Fans turned on. Norton's strange moves, clumsy dancing, and loyal charm were all back, and they were even better than before. No one thought Carney would be as good as he was. It was his fourth Emmy win in 1966. It was his fifth in 1967. And it was his sixth in 1968. 3 years, 3 Emmys, and he was barely able to keep it together. Music was added to the show for the first time. He danced, sang, and made people laugh like nothing was wrong, but later he told someone something scary in private. At that time, playing Ed Norton not only saved his job, it also saved his life. The role gave him a reason to live when everything else was going wrong. The show's bright lights couldn't hide what was going on behind the scenes, though. It was after his time in the sanitarium that Carney stopped taking drugs. He was still choked by drink, though. The results were terrible from 1966 to 1970. His look changed quickly. At 48, he looked a lot older than that. He shook, his face got bigger, and he moved more slowly. Making up couldn't cover up the damage. It took more and more time to get him ready for each scene. Some people think that Carney drank about a fifth of a bottle of whiskey every day. That doesn't count the beer and wine at dinner or in between takes. His weight would go up or down 30 pounds in just a few weeks. He sometimes couldn't remember anything about practice. His co-star, Joyce Randolph, once found him unconscious in his changing room. It happened before. To keep the show's clean image, the team learned how to handle these situations in a quiet way. But on the inside, things were falling apart. Carney did something that most actors in his situation wouldn't even think about after the 1969 season ended. He went back to the same brain hospital in Hartford and checked himself in. There was no controversy, arrest, or action. It was a slow, quiet move because he knew he was in trouble. He was still at the top of his game after winning another Emmy, but he was drinking more than ever. About 4 months went by during this second stay. It wasn't just rest, he was working too. He spent a lot of time in therapy. During his time in group meetings, he helped shape the way Alcoholics Anonymous does things today. He wrote in diaries. He was just as careful with his own thoughts as he was with Norton's. He joked that his family's history of drinking was an Irish curse. It wasn't exciting, it was planned out. What he learnt in that hospital would help him finally stop drinking for good in 1974, while shooting Harry and Tonto. He didn't get sober right away, but it was a process. As he got better, there was one thing he never went back to: the weddings. Heather Meadows and Gleason stayed in touch and went to a few parties, but Carney didn't show up. There are no interviews, comments, or nods to the past. Meadows died in 1996, but didn't say anything about it in public. For that, some people called him cold. But people who knew him knew it wasn't because he didn't care. It was about getting through. Too much pain was connected to that part of his life. Audrey Meadows wrote a biography in 1994 called Love, Alice. In it, she called Carney smart and kind, but she also said that they were never close. She could tell he felt guilty. What is it about? She wasn't sure. One time she thought that he might have blamed himself for something during those hard years of shooting. She didn't say mean things. They were soft and sad. She even thought about getting in touch later on, but she didn't. Art had already left that part of his life behind, she said, but it was harder for him to heal in his personal life. He thought he was getting a second chance in 1966. He married Barbara Isaac a year after getting out of the hospital and divorced his first wife, Jean Myers. She wasn't just anyone. She knew how hard it was because she worked behind the scenes in TV. She thought she could keep him steady. That looked like it was true for a while. He stopped taking pills. He quit taking amphetamines. His life looked like it was getting better, but he was still drunk. By 1977, the second marriage was over. It wasn't just another split up. It was the last crack in a life that was already broken. The man was in his late 50s. Most men his age were planning to take it easy and enjoy retirement, but he was falling apart. Barbara, who had been there for him since the early 1960s, finally gave up. She had worked on shows like the Art Carney special and thought he was talented, but she couldn't go through the cycles any longer. The vows, the drinking, and the slip-ups. Their relationship had been through one rough patch in 1965. It couldn't handle another 10 years of getting worse. Carney became very lonely after she left. His friends said he would stay in his flat all weekend. He didn't talk to many people because he was surrounded by empty pill and bottle containers. He would talk to himself in the mirror sometimes. It was a scary picture. This was the same person who made people laugh as Ed Norton. He was now all by himself. Even his kids from his first marriage turned away. They didn't know how to talk to the new man he had turned into. A strange offer was made by Paul Mazursky for Art Carney to act in Harry and Tonto. The offer even seemed like a joke. Carney had spent his whole life on TV making people laugh. He wasn't going cross-country with a cat in an independent movie with a budget of less than $1 million. He had only been in 2 films before, and neither of them stood out. Now that he was 54 years old, he was asked to play a weak 72-year-old man. He turned it down more than once, saying that the plot was a boring travel story. He was too young, he said, but he was really old because he had been drinking a lot for years. He was gray and bald, and he walked funny because of a war injury. He looked a lot older than he was. Mazursky didn't give up. He saw something in Carney that other people didn't. Pain, being alone, and being strong in the quiet. The person was named Carney. Bill McCaffrey, who had been his agent for a long time, told him straight out, "Do it. You're old." That hurt a lot. It was true, but it was mean. Carney was aware of this, but just when it looked like he had his big chance, almost everything went wrong. In one scene, Carney had to take Tonto, his cat, up several flights of stairs. His heart stopped beating quickly, and he knelt down and started throwing up something dark and grainy. Everyone went cold. Blood was there, even though it looked like coffee grounds. Blood that was digested from abdominal bleeding. A collapsed diaphragm was the result of years of drinking too much, and the physical stress had set off something very bad. He was taken to a Los Angeles hospital right away. They told him, "If you keep drinking, you'll be dead in 6 months." Outside of the set, no one knew what took place. After only 3 days, Carney came back, but he looked like a ghost, weak and shaking. Scenes had to be rewritten so that they were easier on the bodies. However, Carney did not stop. When he was almost killed, he had to do something very dangerous. Antibus. It was a very bad drug. It would make him very sick if he drank even a little alcohol. His heart was beating fast. He needed something that strong or he would throw up for hours. He threw away all of his bottles. He stopped going to restaurants, bars, and even friends who drank with them. He knew he couldn't give in, so he would stand outside booze stores and stare for hours. He used Antibus as a cover. He didn't waste the best chance of his career because of it. Then the unthinkable took place. Art Carney won Best Actor at the 1975 Academy Awards. Not even he thought it would happen. Jack Nicholson for Chinatown, Al Pacino for The Godfather Part 2, and Dustin Hoffman for Lenny are the other actors up for the award. The role of Albert Finney in Murder on the Orient Express. Stories. Everyone. Since Nicholson was clearly the favorite, most of them didn't even show up. People in the room gasped when Glenda Jackson read Carney's name. Some people were shocked. A man with just 2 small movie credits beat 4 big names. It helped, but it didn't take away the pain. Carney still had deep wounds. He had been turned down for the movie version of The Odd Couple many years before, even though he was famous for playing Felix Unger on Broadway. Instead, Jack Lemmon was picked. Carney always thought that his drinking and mental breakdown hurt his chances of getting the part. It scared him. He still had stress and guilt even after winning the Oscar. Friends saw that he had some strange habits, like stacking coins in a certain way, with big ones at the bottom and small ones on top. These were small signs that he wasn't feeling well. He got a second chance with the award, but it didn't fix what was wrong. After his first wife, Jean Myers, died in 1980, Carney married someone else, which shocked everyone. They had been split up for 15 years. They were married for 25 years the first time and had 3 kids, Eileen, Brian, and Paul. But drug abuse had ruined it. Carney had gone to a mental hospital in the middle of the 1960s. He got married again after the split, but it didn't last. He and Jean kept in touch for the kids, though. Art Carney was famous, but he never really liked being the center of attention. In the 1950s, the Honeymooners made him famous, but he left that fame and never looked back. In the 1970s and 1980s, when TV started showing reunion shows, Carney was the only big name that wasn't there. It had Jackie Gleason there. It was Audrey Meadows there. But Carney always said no. He could have made a lot of money, but he didn't want to. He would say things like, "Was a great time, but it was only a time," when asked why. I don't dwell on the past. His friends and family said it wasn't about money or pride. He didn't want to be Ed Norton ever again, not even for one night. In 1957, Carney's boss told him that he was ready to fly by himself. But it turned into something more over time. A while ago, Carney said that things do stop. And you don't know the story is over until you look back and see that no one turned the page. He thought of the Honeymooners as a finished book in this way. The next thing was even harder to explain. Ava Meadows passed away on February 3, 1996, from lung cancer. She was 73 years old. The showbiz world responded right away. There were a lot of tributes. Everybody spoke up. All of them except Art Carney. Not a single sentence or quote. Fans were shocked. Even Gleason, who had died many years before in 1987, said nice things about his co-stars in his last talks. But Carney said nothing at all. Some people said it was mean, and others said it was cold. But people who knew Carney thought it was more than that. Meadows said in her last interview that she hoped they would talk again one day. She didn't believe they were angry at each other. She said that quiet can be louder than a fight. It could have been. She thought Carney was mad at himself for something, but she never really said what it was. That made her feel bad, that it hurt him to remember the old him. That quiet might not have meant no, after all. They may have felt bad about it. Carney stayed out of the public eye even more after winning an Oscar for Harry and Tonto in 1975. He stopped drinking, went to anti-bus treatment, and moved away from Hollywood to live a quiet life. He was in a few more films. In 1984, Firestarter and the Muppets took over Manhattan, but they never tried to become famous again.